Welcome to the Choose to Be podcast. Thank you for joining our conversation today. We're very excited about this episode because it's introducing next week where we are interviewing Dr. Kenneth M Adams. He's a renowned author and is highly renowned in the world of sexual addiction and even betrayal. And he came out with a new book, and we were very honored to read the book. I think it's what, Alana, like last week? It just
2 weeks,
dropped.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 2 weeks. I guess by the time this airs, yeah, maybe 2 weeks, this book just dropped. We got a hold of it. I've read it almost twice, and the interview is incredible. So tune in next week for that interview.
But first, we want to tell you about something exciting and cool happening within Choose Recovery that is offering more resources available to you. We have a lot of people who come to us and they're looking for support and help, and they don't know where to get it. They don't know what they need, and they're at all different places in the journey. Choose Recovery really came from this place of seeing needs and not knowing where to help people find those needs. And so we would start a really specific group here, or we would get a resource here. And we've just grown so organically. It's become this really beautiful work as we have created these really specific groups to help people. What we didn't do is we didn't create this overall men's program for healing and women's programs for healing. We have lots of different groups within those. But for those of you who are newer to recovery, we wanted to have a safe landing spot for you where you could get tools, you could start working through your triggers immediately, and you could build this support network with people that you could really trust. I think about some of the women who I went through my early recovery with, and one of them literally texted me this week and she's like, "Hey, I haven't heard from you in a while." And I'm thinking, this is 9 years, right? That she's reaching out to me, and I still have these connections. And so we wanted to create this as groups for you to be able to process what came up this week, what was hard, what was difficult, what questions do you have that you would like someone to make time and space for you, and then to hear what other men or other women are doing around this specific topic. So it's a really long-winded way of saying Choose Recovery has a betrayal trauma program for you to come join, to get those basic tools, to be able to have a place to learn and to grow and to heal and to have support. And we still have all of our specialty. We have the leaning in group. We have the believing in you. We have the taming your triggers. We have those specific groups, which are awesome. And now we have the basic betrayal trauma healing. And our men's addiction program, it's still in the works. That's going to come out a little bit later, but we have this betrayal trauma. Amie has groups for divorced starting in April. I have groups for the betrayed who are staying in the marriage. Both are starting in April. And then Luke and I have our couples group that's starting in April. So April's a big month. We have lots of cool things coming.
Going on.
Yeah. You can get on the wait list now. Just know wherever you are in the healing, we have a group to support you.
Yeah. And I want to highlight too is that we are offering these intro groups, I guess, if you will, when you're wanting the support groups, we are offering the first 3 months free to help
Probably
you
important to say.
to help you get started. And before, very reasonable payment plan monthly is available for that to keep the groups running. But I think that, I know I hear all the time, like, where can I go right now? I need support. And I was in a healing trauma seminar, and she was talking about how important it is when we are experiencing triggers and trauma responses and in that sympathetic and dorsal vagal, and we're just kind of living in those. And what really helps get to that parasympathetic state is safety and support. That's why we're really excited to be able to offer this to so many men and women, because it scientifically proven it really does help the system, your internal system, heal and have that safety and that calm and clarity come when you, like you said before, have other people who see you, hear you, and know that you're not alone and you're not crazy. So yeah, I'm excited. Of course, I am excited to hold space for women who are, now this one is for if you are leaning towards divorce, where hearing about women staying is triggering you now, and you're like, where do I go now? Because I'm not divorced, but that's just not okay. the divorce group would be for you, or if you are working through a divorce or are divorced, that's what that group would help with, wanting to meet you where you are at and meet your needs. So if you're interested, go to the Choose Recovery website. I think it's info@chooserecoveryservices.com. Let them know you are interested in the support groups, and our amazing Vanessa will reach out to you and get you situated and ready to go in April.
And what's cool too with Vanessa is if you don't know where you fit or where you like which group is right, she does free consultations and she'll sit down with you, hear where you're at, and then give those recommendations. And that even that can just be so helpful because sometimes it's like, where do I go? Where do I fit? What do I even need? And so having somebody who is trained to be able to say, okay, based off of what I'm hearing, here's my recommendations. So helpful.
Yeah, very much so. I'm excited.
Okay.
So again, we're introducing Dr. Kenneth M. Adams, who just recently wrote the book called A Light in the Dark, The Hidden Legacy of Adult Children of Sex Addicts. It is co-authored with Mary E. Meyer and Culle Vande Garde. They are the co-authors of this book. And they go into detail around the unique issues that are experienced by adult children who grew up with sexually addicted parents. And let me just tell you, this book blew my brains up in such a beautiful, good way. Light bulb moments and connections for me that I have been missing as part of my own healing gave me such another level of healing to do with my children
Yeah.
who are adult children of a sex addict and a betrayed partner. Alana and I have been wigging out about this since we've read the book, and we've just been going back and forth with each other, marketing, going, oh my gosh, this piece. I will tell you though, like maybe just start with this right off the bat, Alana, because I think after the first, I was on my road trip when I was listening to it. And I think after the first hour, I marked you and I was like, holy bleep, I feel like crap, like guilt trip massively. So I want to start with that for those of you who read this book. Yes. And then what I love of what Dr. Adams said to me when I told him that was guilt means growth. Because I told him what this is doing for me and how I'm showing up for my children and acknowledging and validating, healing some pieces. That's growth. And I just thought that was really cool that he said that to me. But yeah, I recognize some ways that I showed up as a betrayed partner through those years with my children and can see how it's played out in their lives and but because of where I'm at in my healing journey, and I am ready to see those pieces and I am ready to do some healing for my children and show up and be there in that way, exciting too. Like really.
I think it's exciting anytime that we have a roadmap to healing. I had a client recently and we were going through some past traumas and there was a lot of pieces there. And I could tell he was feeling overwhelmed with it. And I said, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I am actually really excited that we know what pieces are really impacting you because now we have a plan of what to address and what to work on. So we do get to heal and move forward, which is a beautiful thing. And yeah, eh, okay, so my oldest is 18 and my youngest is 9. And this all came out about 9 years ago. So he was 9 when it all came out. And so we've done a lot of healing, and half of his life, literally half of his life was not in my husband and I were not in recovery, and the other half of his life we were working recovery. Now, granted, too, from the second we were working recovery, we were not fixed. There was a lot of layers in healing. So more of his life than not. We had some really unhealthy family dynamics. And for a really long time, I was always just he messed it up. He screwed up our family. He screwed up our kids. And I had so many big feelings that were directed towards him and putting full blame on him. And while he still has full responsibility for his choices, throughout the years, I've really been doing my work on recognizing ways that the system was impacting me and in turn, how I responded to this system, which was a combination of responding to his choices, but also some of my family of origin stuff that I brought into the relationship. And so This is a really long-winded way of saying this book did bring up some stuff for me. And I think if I were earlier in the journey, it might be hard to hear because when my pain was so big, I couldn't see anything other than my pain and him being the problem. And I'm not saying that the book makes you take on this as your problem, but it really looks at it systemically, which we are all part of systems and we all come from systems and we're all impacting each other. And it is so healthy to be able to look at these pieces and it's hard. And so
Yes.
we actually did the interview yesterday with Dr. Adams and it was so good. But then after we finished, we went, oh man, like we both read the book. Is this going to be too much for you listening? And so we decided we're going to do an episode before that we can go in and talk to you listeners and give you more of a foundation of what the book is and what can come up as you read the book and what you can come up of even listening to the episode
Yeah.
because you might have a lot and it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. And it's one of the, what I like to do when things come up where I read stuff, even this with this book, is I have a notebook with me and I just, things that are emotionally charged, I just write down what emotionally charged me, that paragraph, that sentence, whatever, and walk away from it. And then I can come back to it, bring it to my therapist, bring it to you, and just talk about it and process it out because it's a learning opportunity. That's how I view it is, okay, there's something there. There's a part that was triggered, protective part, whatever. There's something that just got hijacked, and growth is looking at it and becoming more aware of the pieces around it. And sometimes we're not ready to look at it, but just acknowledging that it is there is enough. So I don't care if you write it down and put it away for another time, but it's that, okay, I'm ready to take the next step of my healing journey, pull out the, there it is. And so that's just one suggestion as you do any of this work, not just with this book, but anytime you're leaning in, when you feel emotionally hijacked and you, even if you want to, if you're hijacked and you all of a sudden make a 180 shift in your healing and go a completely different direction, just make note of what just happened. What are you thinking? And come back to it when you're ready. But anyways, that's just maybe a little tip that you can use.
Can I talk about
Something.
it quick?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hold on.
totally.
I use that a lot with clients, especially one of the books that I recommend a lot for betrayal trauma is Healing from Betrayal Trauma, Dr. Kevin Skinner's book. But there are things in there that the majority of my clients will get triggered with. And I say, when that happens, we're just going to bookmark it and note that and bring it back because that lets us know where the work is that we will do. And you just said that so beautifully that maybe it's now and maybe it's later, but we want to recognize that. And just a quick side note, Amie and I have been sitting together probably an hour before we hit record, literally processing something that both of us ironically we were both reading the same book on boundaries. The same part activated both of us. We both happened to get in disagreements, confrontations. I don't know how you'd put it with our spouses last night.
Hard conversations.
Hard, hard conversation, but it was both of us got activated around something that we read. And then today we were able to do some really beautiful processing together around it. And for me, I realized there's still a lot more here that I need to keep doing some work on this. And so it's just information that old me prior to doing my work me would have been like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And then I would get busy with something else and healthier, not healthy, not have it all figured out, but working on my stuff me says, oh, there's something there. I'm
Yeah.
going to make note of that.
Yeah.
So I just thank you
Well,
for,
yeah. And it's again what Dr. Adams said to me, like guilt means growth. And I love that word growth because it means we're always learning. There's always something there. It's why there's no arrival, like however you want to phrase it. And sometimes when we say healthy, like I want to get to a healthy place, and sometimes how our brain can interpret that means there is an arrival. And so I love that you even clarified that with yourself. Like, yeah, there's no place that we get. We're growing. And when we have these opportunities of conflict, even that word, my perception and how I view that word has changed. There was conflict, but because we both stayed in the conflict with each other and worked through it, there was some growth. I can see where there's personal growth. And so for myself. And so, anyways, it's hopefully this is the mindset. We're inviting you, I guess, to embrace that mindset with this book. And then again, let's just clarify this book. And Dr. Adams does a good job next week in our interview of doing this too. But this book is specifically for the model for adult children whose parents, where there's patterns of addiction in that family system. Both parents, one parent and one betrayed, whatever that looks like, sexual addictions. And so if you, as an addict or betrayed, have that as your family of origin, patterns of addiction, then this will put massive pieces together for you because nothing is out there like this. And it is remarkable. And a lot of these patterns are passed down generationally. So we do see a lot of addicts who came from that family system of addiction, sexual addiction, and it absolutely can lead to this carried over shame, which he addresses remarkably in this book. And so it will help you. There's a part, I think you and I both did a gasp of breath when he said, I might botch it because he did it. He's so eloquent. But when he talked about shame, and he's like, when you're doing work and there's a lot of addicts that get to that part where they've done all this work on their own shame and there's still shame showing up and they can't figure this out. It's generational shame that they have to release.
Not theirs to carry.
It's not theirs to carry. And you looked at you and we both went like, a freaking men. And I think that's a really big missing piece with a lot of therapists, clinicians that don't see that piece and understand that and just go around and around. And I can see a lot of frustrated people on both sides, addict or betrayed, where they're carrying trauma, addiction, fear, shame, whatever. And it's like, why? I'm doing all this work. Like, what is the problem? Why is there still stuff showing? For me, that was a light bulb moment. Oh, there's something here that's not mine to carry.
That the book, It Didn't Start With You. I've recommended that to multiple clients because it does a good job. Terry Real talks a lot about this. He's another therapist on generationally, we can pass things forward or we can stop and we can pass it back. And we get to choose what we pass forward and what we pass back. And it's interesting looking at this and looking at, we're going to have different experiences to learning these pieces based off of how old our kids are too. Like if your kids have already left, you might be listening to this and be panicked of like, oh my gosh, we've already passed on all of this shame and we've already passed on all of these things. Or if your kids are little and you're going, oh my gosh, how do we not pass this on? And again, like the book is not written specifically for you as parents on how to help in this process. It's written they're called ACSA, Adult Children of Sex Addicts. So it's written for the ACSA, but there's things that you can learn as a parent as you listen to this around ways that they're being impacted in ways specifically, because I know most of our listeners are betrayal trauma, a lot of ways that in our ways that we're responding can impact our children. And so if you've listened to us long enough, you already know what I'm about to say, but I want to make sure we stop and pause and highlight the difference between guilt and shame, because we've talked about guilt being that teacher, but then shame being problematic and shame passing on the shame and shame blocking our healing and shame is the lifeblood of addiction. And so really quick, the difference is guilt is I did something either outside of my value system or bad or something that doesn't make me feel good. And shame is I am bad. I am wrong. I am broken. So it's very internalized in how we see ourselves. And so it's an abstract concept, this idea of passing down shame generationally. But I can tell you, I have seen it firsthand with my own clients, in my own marriage, and culturally,
Yeah.
just these shame messages being passed and shared.
Yeah. I told Terry Real, I've got him on my mind because I'm going to read a quote from him in a minute.
I wish
I
you
was
had talked to him. I'd be like, he's coming on next.
We got to get Terry on next. Actually, let's totally do that. No, I was telling Dr. Adams, like I recently have had an experience in my own trauma therapy work where I released some generational fear. And it was a massively different experience in my
Felt different.
body, felt so different. And the reason why it feels abstract, it does until you can get really good at feeling your feelings and paying attention to your body. And when you have that skill and that practice, it does feel very different in your body. And because energy, right, shows up physiologically in the body, when we say shame gets passed down, like, let me give you an example. So my son, he was the oldest son. He was telling me years ago how he has a memory of, now I already had my apartment. I already left, but the divorce wasn't final. Still a lot of abuse happening, a lot of scary things happening. That's him showing up and pounding on the door and fights and arguments. And I guess one time that had happened and we were arguing and fighting outside. And he told me that he was staring out the window and had this thought, this part offered him the idea that you have to be the man and take care and be the dad to your brother. Like you've got to step it up and take on this role. And that's what this book talks about that Dr. Adams writes. He talks about different roles that children absorb and take on or are put on them because of the dynamics of the addict and betrayed partners. And even though this wasn't something I asked him to do, he absorbed that role on himself. And to this day, I mean, he's been working on releasing that role, but it's very real to him. That's his job because my younger son lost a father role and my older son needed to absorb that. And so, in regards to this book and who it's written for, it would be my older son to recognize that role that was absorbed because of the situation, the dynamics that he watched outplay, and release that role. And that's energy, that's shame that he carries in his body that when he can release, it will literally feel different in his body. Hopefully, slowing it down and giving you something that is a little bit more tangible can help you see what we're talking about here. And then again, I just want to testify, and I want to read a quote here by Terry Real because I've had too many experiences with this personally that I know this is real. He says, quote, family dysfunction rolls down from generation to generation like fire in the woods, taking everything down in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to their ancestors and spares the children that follow. And I love this so much because I believe it and I'm witnessing it in my own life, and it gives me hope for my children. That even though I have 3 adult children who have taken and absorbed on roles and characteristics because of the dynamics in between both their parents, me and my ex, that hope is not lost. And it takes one parent. It can, like, really just one, right? Like, I have 0 evidence that the other's doing work. I can't speak for that, but I don't have evidence, and I'll just go on what I see and not see, right? But I know what I can control and what I can do. And it takes only one parent to stand in the flame and have the courage to face the children and say, I own that role that you absorbed. And I am sorry. And you don't need to carry that role anymore. And like you heard in our interview with Jeff Struer, talk about the magic and the repair, the healing is in the repair work. Holy moly, I say yes to that too. So that's why we're doing this episode to preempt the one that's coming with really laying hopefully a foundation of thoughts to consider and practice so that when you are ready to lean into this work, you do it with that perception.
And so next week, when we have Dr. Ken Adams come on, he is brilliant and you'll see that, and his brain moves very quickly. And so take whatever you can. If you're further in your healing, you're going to probably take even more. But for wherever you are, take some that really good information. And then the week after, we're going to really dive into what this means for you as the parent, what it means around respecting their Bill of Rights and honoring what they may need. So we have a little mini series happening. That's what's going to happen. Now, I don't remember if I brought this up in the interview with Dr. Adams. Did I talk about my oldest and giving him, hey, when you're ready? So it's interesting because I have, since reading this book, we have opened up the door for conversations now, whether it be him or me, 2 or 3 different times. And there's just something really beautiful about making space for where your children are and what they need. And I will just say this book really gave me the gift as a parent to better know how my child has been affected.
Yeah.
It's just a
And
gift.
it is such a gift. And then, like this quote, know how they've been affected and be a chain breaker. And we have such an opportunity to choose to help these children also be chain breakers. And that's something you can do. It's why the journey of healing and growth never ends. Is there's so many pieces to this, and this is another piece, like you said, when it's time and when it's ready. And I think something is also important to mention here with choose that I think is really beautiful and powerful is that goes in conjunction with this, because there is more training that Alana, you and I are getting around this piece with APSATs, is that, and with Dr. Adams' work, is if this is applicable to you and you do have adult children 18 and over that have questions, that have missing pieces for them, one thing that Dr. Adams suggests is you can do disclosures with adult children. So that can be with one parent, both parents, like there's so many different dynamics here, right? But we want to be able to meet that need and help facilitate that in a healthy way where, like you're talking, your son's asking more questions and he's at an age where he can absorb. And as his brain is developing and becoming more fully developed, he can process some of that a little bit differently than the younger ones. And so being able to give that to your children, it really touched me when I read that part in his book. And I'm like, I want to help facilitate that. I think that's really beautiful piece to healing the family unit. Because again, that's what this is about, is addict doing his work, betrayed doing her work, and now let's heal the family unit and really start chain breaking. It's just beautiful. So that's something that Choose Recovery will be offering, if that's something that is applicable to you as our listener.
There's all of these pieces, like you even talking about that. I'm like, ooh, we go into that next week. Really good. So I hope this gets you excited for the interview next week because he really does bring up some great points to this. There was one thing that was said off air before we had hit record yesterday, and it really stuck with me. Dr. Adams said that adult children who don't do this type of work often either become an addiction themselves or they marry an addict. And I've sat with that and I've been thinking about that concept, and that's that fire rolling forward. And it triggered in something of me as a parent of like, I don't want that for my kids. I don't want them to have this pattern. And it triggered another thing in me of this looking at how I responded. And in the book, it goes over like ways parents can respond. And when my son was young, I became hyper protective around sexuality that sent equally damaging messages. And I'm going to have grace with myself because once I got out of the most acute pain, all of my training and things that I had learned were able to kick back in. But there was a period during his developmental years where there was real damage caused. And so I look at this work as being so important and so instrumental. And it's funny, Amie, that you brought up that quote, because I literally was searching through my email because I had saved that quote like 4 years ago. And I was like, Terry Real Fire. Like, and then you started saying the quote, and I was like, how was it? And even hearing you read that again, like it gives me chills.
Yeah.
It gives me chills because this work that you are doing right here, like listening to me and Amie talk and being with us in this conversation, it has these ripple effects so much bigger than you and with so many generations. And so I'm going to give you a challenge. And Dr. Adams, you are welcome for promoting your book. Each of you before next week, because if you go download it on Audible, it's only like a 4 to 5 hour listen, or order the book. Read it between now and when he comes next week and lay this foundation. You'll get even more out of what he talks about next week. But do this work. Be willing to look at this. Now, again, if it's not today, just put a pin in it. That's okay. Where you are is okay. But if you are ready for this, do learn, do open up your eyes and be part of this stopping the fire and face the fire. And I love that he said fire,
Yeah.
because fire is big and it's hot and it's scary and it can burn you and it can be painful. But face that fire and change the direction. So I don't know if you can tell, but Amie and I are pretty passionate about all of this. And it struck a chord in so many ways, on so many levels.
Yeah. A lot of light bulbs for me. And it really energized me to continue doing that work with my children and repairing and seeing more into me of those pieces that my betrayal mindset and state of betrayal affected and impacted them, and being able to own that, like the over moralization and the, yeah, things like that. I can totally relate to. These repairs with your children are so impactful and beautiful, and it can be done. And you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to do it perfect.
Do-overs are real,
Very real.
but we can't even look at do-overs or acknowledge do-overs until we're willing to open our eyes and make space for ways that maybe we didn't show up the way we wanted to. And just fully expect that there's going to be lots of protector parts that show up here, and invite them along. And then just notice, like, ooh, a protective part didn't want to hear this. Ooh, a protective part got really annoyed with this or frustrated with this or sad around this. And just let this be an opportunity to get curious and notice what comes up. It's just such good, important work.
It really is.
So if you've hung with us this long and you haven't turned us off because your protector parts were like, we're done, stay tuned for next week. But do get that book on Audible or get the book and have it sent to you. It's probably not going to be in a library yet because it's still so new, but get that prepared. And then next week, you're in for a treat for him coming. So, as always, thank you for hanging out with me and Amie this week. Thanks for being part of the conversation, and we will see you all next week.